Thank you, Madam President. I want to actually frame my comments and ask some questions to the airport and port officials that are here. Mr. Gazsi, if I can just bring him up to the table.
Can we make room for...
Thank you. Mr. Seroka.
Mr. Seroka.
I think there's space here. And the reason being, as you know, millions of passengers come through our airport. Millions of containers pass through our port. And whenever there's a threat of a transmission such as the coronavirus, it's definitely a threat to one of the most valuable economies in our city and throughout our region, and those who can not only impact the economy, but also impact the people who work at these two sites. So I want to ask just to both the airport and port who are here, what measures have been implemented at LAX and the port in response to the coronavirus, and what actions will be taken in order taken in the number of infections, if the number of infections increase?
I'll begin. Good morning, Madam President, council members. Gene Seroka, Executive Director at the Port of Los Angeles. I'll start off with your question around the economics, council member. From the middle of February through April the 1st, 40 vessel sailings scheduled for Los Angeles have been canceled. That represents about 25% of our normal vessel calls during that period of time. We have advised the marketplace that we expect Q1 container volume to be down 15 to 17% at the beginning of this year. And unfortunately, that follows the ill-advised trade policies set out by Washington, which caused a 16.5% decline in container volume during the fourth quarter of 2019. The industry's main look at China is that at our Port of Los Angeles, about 50% of all of our business goes to and from China. Today, through our sources on the ground and through industry, production in China at the manufacturer's level is about 40% of normal. And that is taking into account energy consumption, traffic patterns, as well as normal pollution measurements in and around the manufacturing community. Cargo moving out of Southeast Asia is at regular or heightened levels, in some cases to try to make up for this decline from China business. And in summation, for our port community, less cargo means fewer jobs.
Right.
Our dock workers are not out on the job at normal levels. And in fact, per their coast-wide contract with the Employers Association, some are now starting to receive the pay guarantee program, meaning that the industry is paying our dock workers to stay at home because there is not enough work. Our truckers are not pulling as many loads, and folks in the warehouse industry are also suffering because of the lack of cargo volume. It is our estimation that the effects of the coronavirus and the downturn in trade will cost us tens of billions of dollars in the industry when all is said and done. The issue today is that empty containers, perishable commodities, and agricultural products are stacking up at our ports because of those vessel sailing cancellations. That will cause the American farmer further harm on top of the trade tariffs. What the port is doing is working very closely with our supply chain community and partners in labor, making sure we have an understanding of when the tide will turn in this particular area of manufacturing and what we can do to evacuate the empty containers and the all-important agricultural products to move to their customers. We have received information that one of our great partners, Maersk, will be deploying the largest vessels ever to call the Western Hemisphere later this month in the assistance to help us move the empty containers and perishable commodities out as quickly as possible. And we'll work very closely with rail providers, trucks, shipping lines, and terminal operators, along with our cargo owners, to continue to move this forward. But I believe there will be a whipsaw effect in the industry. We're going to have to get these empty containers out, and we must be very well prepared for an increase in inbound cargo volume when folks start to go back to work. In closing, we are of the very keen understanding that this is a serious public health issue. And we need in the global community to curb the illness and eradicate the virus, get folks back to work and on the job.
Thank you, Mr. Seroka. I know we mentioned a lot about the movement of goods, but how about the crew members who are coming from these impacted countries? What are we doing? Are we working in collaboration with the Coast Guard and the state, federal levels, and our partners? I know Chief Gazsi's here representing the Port PD. But that's another topic of concern of crew members who are coming through our port complex. So what are we doing to address that?
That's right. And I will turn the mic over to Chief Tom Gazsi, Head of Port Police at the Port of Los Angeles. We're taking all precautions and working with allied agencies at the federal, state, county, and local level to make sure we have all precautions, mitigations, and actions in place. Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seroka. Madam President, honorable members of the council, Councilman Busciano, thank you for having us. With respect to the maritime side of the Port of Los Angeles, we have done a tabletop exercise that included LA County Health Services, CDC, U.S. Coast Guard, Customs Border Protection, FBI, LAPD, LAFD, Long Beach Fire, as well as obviously Port Police. In the case of inbound crews, both on cruise ships and container ships, break bulk, auto carriers, the full breadth of vessels that come in and berth at the Port of Los Angeles. Screening starts by CBP at satellite facilities in shared ports overseas. During transit, Customs Border Protection and Coast Guard does regular crew checks verbally with the crew master, the ship's master, and the ship's captain. At 96 hours out, 4 days out, an assessment of all crew members is conducted by the ship's doctor and by the ship master. Should a violation of these federal and international ordinances occur, there's a $94,000 penalty per incident. If there's an indication of illness on board a vessel that's inbound either to the Port of Los Angeles or to Long Beach, the vessel would be held by U.S. Coast Guard and Customs Border Protection either at sea or at anchor until that incident, that specific illness that had an indication of COVID-19 or other, is rendered to be safe. The patient would be quarantined on board the ship. If it's necessary due to the symptoms to isolate the patient, that would occur. And then when it's safe to potentially remove the individual, assuming it's in the Port of Los Angeles, with great care and great deference with LAFD to the patient as well as to the remaining crew members and to the community, the patient under CDC approval and LA County Health Services approval would be carefully triaged, removed from the vessel, and taken to an appropriate medically approved facility for treatment.